Morning, everybody. Happy D-Day. And welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by my fellow Mirror columnist and sports writer, Mr. Darren Lewis. Morning, Darren.
Morning.
Now, we're going to go through the biggest stories of the day. Well, there is only one. So get into the comments, ask us your questions, and we will do our best to answer them for you. Now, it's D-Day, or Dominic Day, if you're working in Downing Street or Fleet Street, when the Prime Minister's former advisor is due to give evidence to a parliamentary committee, which will be so revelatory, so devastating, that it's going to tell us the Prime Minister, wait for it, is a bit of a prat. Now, the Mirror has splashed on the PM being out of touch and out of control. And frankly, we could have done that every day for the past decade or more, maybe. So possibly this is the most hyped committee of all time. And it is in effect going to tell us what we all already knew, perhaps with some WhatsApp messages to back it up, which would be interesting. We're going to discuss later whether that's going to make any difference to the PM. But first, there's something which may well seriously damage him among that Brexit voting Red Bull base of his. Might hurt him more than Dominic's evidence. Perhaps even Dominic will give evidence about it. We don't know. And that's our colleague Pippa Crerer's exclusive today, that he knew all about the European Super League before it was announced. Da, da, da. Now, Darren, you've read the story. What is it telling us about the big white laundry hamper?
Well, first of all, it is a terrific story by our Pippa, and who's been all over the shenanigans around Downing Street right from the very start. And she's been at the forefront of letting us know just how unfit for office and how incompetent Boris Johnson is and has been. Remember, this is the guy who hid in a fridge to get away from the guys at Good Morning Britain who wanted to interview him just before the general election. So this is the guy we're dealing with, basically. But the wonderful thing, Susie, about this story is that it is everything about it reeks of classic Johnson, not knowing about the brief, not knowing about the issue, going with the prevailing wind so that he could appear popular, and lying through his teeth with his back against the wall, and witnesses and well-placed sources able to corroborate the story. I will give you some background, having worked in sport. For those who don't know, the Super League was the plan for 6 of the top clubs in Europe to join a select number of other big clubs across Europe, 12 of them in total, and they would have formed their own closed shop of football. Now, the plans, they caused an eruption. I've worked for the Daily Mirror 21 years, never seen anything like it, Susie, an eruption of anger across the country. The fans protested outside the stadiums at Chelsea, at Spurs. They rioted at Manchester United, broke into the stadium, disrupted a Sky Sports live broadcast, forced a game to be postponed, forced the whole thing to be shut down. Now, at the time, in April, Boris Johnson came out and he criticised it heavily, called the clubs a cartel. Oliver Dowden met with fans. Boris Johnson was threatening legislative bombs, if I remember rightly, and promised to back fans all the way. Now, 1 month on, we come to Pippa's story, which I know she's been working on for quite some time. He'd been told about it by a chief of staff, Dan Rosenfeld, I'm sure we can name him as he's named in the story, after a Downing Street meeting with the now ex-Manchester United chairman, Ed Woodward. And he told the clubs that he wouldn't stand in their way. This was before the details of the proposal had come out. He is on the ropes over this, Susie, big time.
Yes, very much so. And now, if anyone who watched The West Wing, right, if you remember, the chief of staff, Leo McGarry, the guy who had a face like a cliff, who effectively runs everything, all right? And this is what Dan Rosenfeld's job is in Downing Street. He is effectively the Prime Minister's bagman. The Prime Minister swans about writing his Shakespeare books or getting people pregnant or whatever it might be, does his thing. But Dan Rosenfeld does the day-to-day operation of government. He is the Prime Minister's right hand. Well, I don't know what he does with his right hand. Maybe it's his left hand. But he does. Sorry, it's a bit early in the day. It's a horrible thought. But he's the person who does a lot of the work, shall we say? Leave it to that. And now Dan Rosenfeld is reportedly now he was having these meetings with the ESL. On the way out of one of these meetings, or with the clubs about the ESL, on the way out of one of these meetings, they bumped reportedly into Boris Johnson in a corridor or something. But Dan did run this past the Prime Minister and say this is what was happening. And the story is that Boris Johnson just knows nothing about football, right? You might as well have asked me. I know nothing about football. And he said, that's fine. He does his thing. And so then the clubs think they're all right. Off they go. And obviously, suddenly, then Boris Johnson realises he's on a very sticky wicket and comes out on the side of the fans and says that's that. Dan Rosenfeld now is reportedly looking for work elsewhere, undermined, he feels. And there are two devastating bits in Pippa's copy. Only one of which is a paper, they're both available online, in which he was told he could appoint his deputy, but then a friend of Carrie's was parachuted in to do the job. And he was told he could shake up the number 10 policy unit by the Prime Minister. And then when he wanted to go and do that, the Prime Minister then denied ever asking him to do so. So you've got a boss who is chaotic and out of control, which just about sums it up. And it's amazing anybody's working there in the circumstances. Now, Mike says, morning, Mike. Johnson's superpower is that embarrassing news whizzes at him so fast, people are still reading the current one when the next one hits. He's like Wonder Woman, deflecting the stories. I don't think he's deflecting. He just doesn't care, frankly. Right? I think more than anything else, it doesn't sort of stick on him, does it?
No, it doesn't. And there is a serious aspect to this. There is a serious aspect to this because this guy is running out of the country. This guy is in charge of a wide range of things that affect ordinary people's lives. And he literally decides on policy on the hoof. Now, as you were talking about Dan and his feeling of being undermined, I was thinking, and I think the two are connected, about Johnson's private life. Which kind of interconnects with our lives because government money is used for some of his, shall we say, extracurricular activities. Anyone who has seen the story of Jennifer Arcuri will know all about that. So, and there are a number of people who have talked about being let down from his ex-wives to, I don't want to go too deeply into that, but again, they matter. They matter because they do. They interconnect into public life. And I think as far as he is concerned, his ability to be trusted, anyone who's seen the Max Hastings piece eviscerating, well, a couple of Max Hastings pieces actually eviscerating Boris Johnson will know he simply cannot be trusted. So when you talk about Dan Rosenfeld and his feeling of being undermined, he really does have to get in the queue. What we're seeing here and what we've seen ever since Boris Johnson, even before Boris Johnson was appointed, was a long sustained history of untrustworthiness, of incompetence, of duplicity, of mendacity. This is a guy who's totally unfit to be running the country. And a lot of people, since he has been in power, have found that out.
Yeah. And I think probably the part of the reason it doesn't stick is that, he doesn't have skeletons in his closet. If Keir Starmer has one particular thing, it came out of his closet, we'd all go, oh, that's interesting. But Boris Johnson's skeletons are so far out of the closet, they've got their own Mardi Gras. They should probably have civil partnerships as well. And so we're all busy watching the Mardi Gras and not the fact that the closet is really big. But there's one more thing. Before we move on to the next story about Dominic Cummings, I want to just ask one question, Darren. This story, there seems to be sources that have come from the clubs. So this would appear to have substantiated this with Pippa. So it appeared to be the clubs trying to protect themselves a bit by diverting some of the fans' fury to the Prime Minister saying he gave it the nod. Is that going to stop the fans being cross at the Glazer brothers and others? Because it was their big idea. Is it going to work?
No, it won't. It won't, because the fans have good and long-standing reasons for being unhappy with the clubs in terms of lack of investment, in terms of the detachment from the clubs, no real relationship with them. A lot of the owners of the clubs live in America and very seldom come to football matches in this country. A lot of the fans have wanted the owners of those clubs to sell up a long time ago. because they feel they've bought clubs with debt and continue to take money out of the clubs without reinvesting back and making a success of those clubs. In the case of Manchester United, it doesn't really matter whether the club is successful or not, because they have been successful since the Glazer brothers, without boring you with too much detail, took over around about 15, 16 years ago. They simply want them out. So will it affect? It's not really an attempt by the clubs to heap pressure onto Boris Johnson. And it isn't about the anger and the fire being directed towards Boris Johnson. It's about the fans' upset and anger and vitriol towards the clubs. And I don't think that's going to change.
No, well, good luck though, and thank you for telling people about it anyway, clubs, because it's very handy. Now we're going to move on a little bit because it is D-Day, it's Dominic Day, and Dom's bombs today are going to be interesting to watch. We've got the bodies piling high comments. Dom's bombs. There you go. I should get paid double. The fact that he's suggested, apparently we're being told that he was going to be he wanted to be injected with COVID live on telly to prove that it wasn't hurtful. This is a man who ended up in intensive care. That he was on a long holiday at Chevening when the first deaths began. He refused a second lockdown to start with, and that cost tens of thousands of more lives. That he wanted to go and see, this is one that Laura Kunzberg's broken this morning, he wanted to go and see the Queen on March the 18th. And that is a fortnight after being told not to shake hands and a week before he tested positive. And he had to be talked out of potentially killing the Queen, Darren. But in the Politics newsletter today, Jason Beattie has made the very excellent point, and I'm going to read it out in full because it's worth saying. It is extraordinary that MPs are spending 4 hours of their time interrogating an unreliable witness who inhabits the fringes of normal human behaviour, which is a fairly devastating but accurate description of Dominic Cummings. So, Darren, I think the question is, most people don't like Dominic Cummings. He's a very odd chap. Whatever evidence he may produce, is it going to make any difference to any of us, whether you voted for Boris Johnson or Brexit or whether you didn't? How is it going to change anybody's minds? Is it going to?
I don't think it will, and partly because I'm minded straight away when you ask me that question to think of the alternative. Remember Jonathan Ash was going on to, again, Good Morning Britain, and he was asked, okay, you're critical of the government. What are Labour's policies? What's Labour's big master plan? You've had your meeting, and Jonathan Ash said, I can't tell you, it's confidential. Really? I mean, this is the alternative to the buffoonery that is Boris Johnson. And I think a lot of people see it, I think our guys were talking beforehand, it's alien versus predator. For a lot of people, the alternative doesn't bear thinking about. And that's quite sad. I wrote a column a couple of weeks about this, about the fact that there is all of the people who felt Labour represented them, my parents' generation, do not feel Labour represents them adequately enough anymore. And that's the reason why this shambles of a government continues, and why Boris Johnson is almost the Teflon Don. He gets away with so much. He has no shame. His ministers have no shame. There are many things for which previous administrations would have fallen along so many times that the current administration gets away with. And Jason Beattie's right, Susie. Dominic Cummings, remember, sat in a garden and, in my opinion, just to choose my words carefully, lied through his teeth. Drove to Barnard Castle during a lockdown. Again, Pippa all over that story. And it sparked revulsion really around the country because so many people were making sacrifices. And here was a guy basically defending the indefensible. And Boris Johnson came out and defended his position too. So this is going to be fascinating because although you can't believe what he says, it does matter. People have lost their lives. And that's why it matters. He was at the heart of the government's COVID operation. That's why it matters. Decisions taken during that period, they matter. Remember the bodies piled high comment. That matters.
It's difficult to see how someone who is quite publicly reviled and who was at the heart of making all these decisions can really say that the wrong decisions were made and that he had, he was powerless to do anything about it. Now, morning, Frankie. You seem a cheery soul. Do you both think you're judge and jury? It's bloody disgusting that you can slander people to your heart's content and get paid for it. You're correct for once, right? Because whenever people accuse journalists of defamation, they usually get libel and slander the wrong way around. But you've done it right, Frankie. The oral castigation of someone, a derogatory information about somebody which is incorrect, would be slander. Yes, you're right. However, we haven't done that because we are professionals and we know defamation law. What we've done is report what's in the paper today, which passed through a lawyer first, don't you worry. So it's not slander, okay? And what you've done there actually is called libel because you've written it down. And what you've done is you've accused us in our professional capacities of something that would be not only unethical, but a civil offence. Now, in theory, we could say, Frankie, we're going to sue you for defamation. How dare you libel us, right? And I presume that's your name and your picture, so we could probably find you quite easily. However, it's not defamation in the law if Darren and my reputation is already so poor as journalists that there is no way you could possibly libel us, right? Which is what most courts would find. If a journalist goes to court and says, hey, someone's been mean about me, the court laughs you just get out of the building again, right? You're not going to get anywhere. No matter how wonderful a journalist you might be Bob Woodward, it's impossible to defame you pretty much. So you've got away with it this time, Frankie. But I've managed to explain a little bit about libel law to people. So there we go. It's been a good day so far. Now, there's one thing.
Their comments now after you've said that.
I like a troll. I like educating them. Now, so whether it's going to make any difference, we don't know. We do know it's going to happen later on. But there was someone. Thank you, Tony, and thank you as well to the lady earlier on who was asking about hands. Naughty. But there's one thing, someone was talking earlier on as well about the chatty rat Dominic Cummings and whether we're going to find out, what happened about that trip to Barnard Castle, if he's going to blame it all on Prime Minister so far, whether he's going to be revealed as the source of an awful lot of information. This is a man who has been a master of falsehood throughout the Brexit debate and throughout his time in government. So maybe we're going to, whether we actually get the truth or falsehoods today, who knows, but we're going to get hours of this man's posturing to go through, and there may be some sweet corn to pick out of that. We don't know, but when we do, I want everyone watching this to think about this one thing, because when that guy mentioned chatty rat, I thought about this picture. It is on page 22 of the Mirror today, and it is a wet owl. Now that is Dominic Cummings to me. All right, every time you see Dominic Cummings, just think of the wet owl. Right, that's the man. Look how cross he is. Look how pathetic and thin and scrawny he is. And yet the forehead and the eyes and the right, there you go. Something to take away. Hands, owls. We give it all here, and defamation law. We're going to wind it up now because there is an awful lot of stuff for everybody to do today. Darren, as you probably all heard, has got an awful lot of Google Instant Messages to deal with as soon as we get off air. And the Mirror's channel, the Mirror's video page, is going to be live streaming the wet owl from 9:30 as the wet owl takes on the walking laundry basket who inhabits Downing Street at the moment. And our political team is also going to be analysing it in their coverage later on. So stay tuned to all the Mirror's channels. And if you want to watch the live stream, stick around here and there'll be some stuff in 9 minutes. Twit twoo. See you next week for some more editions of the News Agenda. Bye-bye.